You're listening to the Pursuing Alpha podcast, hosted by Charles Brandon Snyder.
Hey, man, we're live.
Yeah. Glad to be here, man.
That's good. That's good. We haven't done one of these in a couple of weeks. It's kind of been crazy, going crazy with just the office stuff and all that. So I'm excited to have you here, and man, it's going to be a fun one today. This is one I've actually been wanting to do for a while because we've had so many people on really talking about what they do. This is kind of our time to talk about us for a little bit and what we do and how we help people. So, take a few seconds and introduce yourself.
Well, most of y'all might know me. Most of our clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. Name's Gustavo. Born and raised here, Lubbock, Texas. Graduated from Monterey. And then from Monterey, I went to Tech. Went to the personal financial planning program that they have there. And graduated 21 December.
Yeah.
So
CFP now, right? Oh, you can't actually use the CFP title yet?
I can't.
Yeah, but you passed the CFP exams.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I believe I was actually first of my class to actually pass.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, it was stressful. It was a stressful situation. It was
So what is the CFP first?
So the CFP actually stands for Certified Financial Planner.
So you're certified.
Yeah, so it's actually trademarked by the CFP board. So there's only certain instances where you can actually use the CFP, and you have to use it in a certain manner. They're very specific with how they want you to use it. You can't advertise yourself as a CFP unless you have the ethics, hours, experience, and education.
And
so
you passed the exam.
Yep. And I got the education, and now I'm working on the hours and the ethics. So I'm expecting to get the marks within about 2 years, maybe.
I know. I need to work you harder.
Yeah.
Get it a lot quicker.
Yeah, I'm with you there. you don't work me hard enough.
Yeah, right.
You need to give me more.
Yeah. I think you're one of the hardest working guys at our shop.
Well, I try, man. Like, I've always grown up to have a hard work ethic. Just seeing my parents work and seeing how my parents are actually from Mexico.
We got to have a conversation about that here in a second.
Yeah. So
before we go there, though, you got to talk about a PFP program at Texas Tech. Texas Tech is known as like the top financial planning program in the country, isn't it?
That is true.
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty salty. I mean, they're really, really good planning program there. And so we've looked at it for a long time. I was really lucky on hiring you here at Alpha Capital, and man, having you on the podcast, this will be a lot of fun. So I wanted to dive into a couple of things. Definitely want to talk about your parents coming over from Mexico and how that's changed the whole family dynamics there. I actually want to talk about how you actually went to school. I think it's one of the reasons I hired you. One of the most amazing things about you is and it really speaks to your work ethic. But before that, kind of mention what you do as a non-certified financial planner here. So we use you as a
paraplanner.
Yeah, a paraplanner. So you're in pretty much in all of my meetings now, which is really nice for me, I gotta say, because it takes the stress load off of me. Yes. And so you're sitting in all of our planning meetings, you're taking all the planning notes. Mm-hmm. We get together after the meetings, sometimes the next day, we go through everything the client needs, and then you kind of execute the plan documents for us.
Yep. You essentially described it pretty well there. Yeah, I sit in most of your meetings, if not all of them, which is also, again, nice for me. I get to have that experience with you interacting with clients. That's actually very, very, very helpful. A lot of financial advisors underestimate how helpful, actually seeing you interacting with the clients, how helpful that is.
So what grade do you give me? C minus?
Nothing that low. No, you're definitely A plus.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So it's neat though, and I think by going through that program, you've actually helped us revamp the way that we're actually training. So I think your destiny, or where you're kind of going to, is to be a full financial planner, mm-hmm. and kind of escalate that over. So, mm-hmm. and it's a mutual beneficial relationship for both of us, for the simple fact that it takes a little bit of workload, so my bandwidth to be able to talk to more clients quicker is helpful for me. But also for you, it gives you the education of, I think the hardest thing in our business has nothing to do with finance. I think it's actually the communication with the consumer and the client. I think that is an art, and it is something that you never master.
You know, I second that right there. I've known plenty of students at Tech who are in the personal financial planning program, and then unfortunately they can't hold down a job because they don't know how to talk to clients.
It's tough. It is one of those things and I was fortunate, and it's kind of like the destiny thing again, where I've got really lucky to have great mentors in my career and my 10, 12 years and actually going through it, is I had to do it the hard way, right? And I just slowly get a little bit better. The problem is when you get good at it, you kind of abuse it for the simple fact is you don't keep on honing your craft. So every year I have to kind of go back to my basics and renew my mind to making sure I'm using the right verbiage in the meetings. And what I mean by that is it's really comes down to is trying to help a consumer or client think through what they want to have happen. And it's not a manipulation. It's not a persuasion. It's just trying to bring some of these tough conversations to the forefront and present them in such a manner that allows them to open their perspective in what their options are, but you can't actually say it to them. The more you actually talk to a client and tell them what they want, the more they won't listen to you. So I'm a strong believer in the fact that they have to tell you what they want. And the only thing you need to do is just, the old mantra, lead a horse to a trough, right?
Yeah.
And see if they drink, right? So you're just kind of leading them down that path to where they want to go. And the fiduciary side of it is really interesting because you have to make sure you have the different paths lined out of all the opportunities that clients get to have in the way that they manage their finances. Right. And you got to be gnostic with it. You got to say, okay, here's option 1, here's option 2, here's option 3.
And here's the advantages and disadvantages of each one.
That's it, right?
And
what does most guys do?
They're just push,
and they tell you only what the advantages are, and they neglect to actually identify the disadvantages.
Yeah, that's very true. That's actually a problem that we find very frequently in our industry is that, working in finance, there's a lot of money involved. So that, you don't necessarily do what's in the client's best interest. But coming and learning from the program at Texas Tech, probably the biggest thing that's pushed is ethics.
Right.
You can only do what is in the client's best interest.
And it's hard to weigh through the scenarios of what's in their best interest, and sometimes because there's there's two different products and they're about as close as you can get. But I learned, and it took me about almost 10 years to really grasp the fact I don't care. I don't care if you choose product 1. I don't care if you choose product 2. The only thing I care about, and this is the biggest knock on me, is I think I'll overeducate. And it creates indecision, right? And I'll always call it planning fatigue.
Yes.
But I'm so concerned about making sure that I give them all the ups and all the downs and go through it so many times with them to make sure they understand. And it's easy. And the fun part where I think we get into is when I go back into that second, third, or fourth meeting, and I try not to ever allow somebody to make a buying decision in that first 2 meetings, right? Because if you do that in the first couple of meetings, then I don't think they internalize it yet.
Right.
And you have to go into that second, sometimes third, sometimes fourth, sometimes fifth. You have to ask that deep question. It's like, all right, last time we visited, what did we talk about? What was important to you? What did we talk about this product? What was the upside? What was the downside? And you get them to actually tell you.
Right. And you also ask them, has anything changed since then?
Right.
I mean, finances are an ever-evolving situation that can change at any moment. So, God forbid you have a death in the family. How does that affect your financial?
Yeah, we had one this week where went to Nashville, I think it was, and his uncle passed away, and I mean his whole decision-making process flipped on its head.
Right.
Quick, right? And we were going down wealth management. Now it was protection.
Right.
And it was like, hey, yeah, that's great. Let's do this, but let's switch over to here. And I think that happens a lot, and you just kind of have to navigate them to it. All right, so I think that kind of defines what we do. I think it's really great on how we frame it. I got to ask you here, because this is the first one that came out of school, right? We've had a lot of guys come through that are part of our firm, but they all came from different arms of business and became planners or became a part of our staff. we've never had somebody come straight out of school. And you had a stint at a pretty prominent national financial planning firm. How do we rack up? Do you think we're good? How do I put him on the spot here, trying to call him out, right?
He is putting me on the spot. I'd say you compare pretty well, actually. I think the model that you're trying to build here for our firm is very similar, which actually attracted me to your firm. Another thing that actually attracted me to your firm is that you actually have a process that we follow. So,
and we really don't deviate from that very often, do we?
We don't really, yeah. There's a couple instances where we might, but those are like exceptions rather than the rule.
Correct. And it's really we call them narratives, when there's a client narrative that sets outside of our normal process, and there's usually a situation behind it. But keep going on there, because I really am always interested on the feedback on our structure, our process, because it took me 10 years to build it. And that's probably the one of the things I'm most proud about is really honing that process and honing that structure inside of it, and our allocation model, and the way that we define from risk to tax to allocations of registration of products. I mean, there's everything that goes into that model, and it is pretty in depth. Almost sometimes I think too in depth, but you got to cover every basis.
Yeah, you can never be too in depth. That's something that I strongly believe, is that if you have everything lined out, as long as you can explain it in a way that's simple to understand to the client, you can never be too in depth.
I agree with you on there. I think the coolest part of what we do is you're talking about some of the smartest people, if not the smartest people in the world, are in our industry.
Yes.
And intelligence to me is taking those complex ideas and trying to distill them down into the simplest term without omitting relevant facts.
Yeah.
I think that is really where it goes to. And some of our models, or most of our models, especially because we're big on maps. Maps are huge here. And our maps in our world is measurable action plans.
Right.
You got MAP, measurable action plan, right? And that's, to us, that is how we build everything. And so if we can take something complex and distill it down into the simplest terms possible without omitting valid, relevant information, facts, right? On the upside and the downside, and build it where it's simplistic, where no matter the sophistication, because you elevate your conversation with a client as best as you can to their educational level in the industry.
Yeah.
And
that goes back to what you were saying, how to communicate with the client.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're talking at a level of a CFA, no one's going to understand what you're saying.
No.
It doesn't matter if you could be...
Hell, I don't understand half the time what our CFAs say.
I'll second you there. I mean, there's a couple of times where I catch some words here and there, and I'm just like, oh, I might know what that means. But for the most part,
they're complex guys that, I mean, they deal in a completely different realm.
It's very complex.
And we know what it is. Like, we're being a little bit out a little obtuse there. But the point is like, there's the CFA level, and then there's I'm retiring, worked my tail off, white collar, blue collar job that's never been in finance. And they just need to build the trust with you, and that they understand that you work as hard as you possibly can to return value to them.
They need the guidance.
They need the guidance, and they want to make sure that what you're putting them in, that you have full conviction that you're going to try as best as your ability to do as best as you can. And we're a different shop too. Like I would say 90% of the shops that we run across all have third-party money managers. We do
internal investing with our CFA that we have.
Yeah. So our CFA, and then having a couple of, I think Dr. Starr, which is coming on tomorrow, which is the first time we've had back-to-back podcasts, which I'm excited about, but it's a lot of work. Yeah, the first time we have Dr. Starr on, so he's got a PhD in economics, and he runs a major university's economics department. So
I'm looking forward to that.
I'm looking forward to that one. I've been looking forward to that one for months upon months upon months, because especially where we're at from a Fed level, that is going to be insanely interesting conversation.
Oh yeah, I mean, God, whether or not they're gonna raise or stagnate the rate hikes. I mean, and we just got through the debt limit.
Yeah. And so I think it was an absolutely horrible agreement. I mean, I don't see a good, and this is why I really want to have a conversation with Dr. Starr, because I know what I know, and I think he has a different take on it. But when every couple of years we have to go back and say, hey, if your own government can't balance their own damn budget, we're in trouble. Right. Everybody else in America has to be accountable for their own budget, but our federal government doesn't.
We need accountability.
And I think inflation is literally theft. It is the government's way of theft, because they get to devalue every single asset in our society with no accountability and complete impunity. That is a problem.
I would compare it more to a tax. So inflation is more like a tax where you don't really see it. You feel it. You don't really see it, though. You don't experience it until you're actually at the grocery store buying, I don't know, whatever you buy, just eggs, meat, beef, chicken, anything. And until you check out, I mean.
You don't think it's the theft, though? You don't say, so if you put $1 on the table and you come back 3 years later and that dollar is only worth 80 cents, you don't see that 20 cents evaporating instantly for no reason as theft?
That's why I see it more as like a tax, is because it does.
I see your point there.
Yeah, it does devalue somewhat the money that you're holding. So, and just how I see it is more of like a tax more than it is theft, whereas someone's
maybe I'm
taking
just
something.
jaded. I'm a little jaded, I think, after this year.
Yeah, no, well, we kind of expected that this would happen, right?
Oh yeah,
so,
we did.
I mean,
it had to happen.
Every time that we hit like a debt limit or a debt ceiling, we're nearing the end of something. They always run last minute to accomplish it, and we already know it's going to pass, and we already know there's not really going to be any good benefit for the American people long term.
And to your point and to my point, I think it proves like the theft side and it proves the tax side. So go look at your federal income tax brackets. Have they changed very much in the last 5 years?
Somewhat, but not
very.
Yeah,
right. So if you're at 22% tax bracket inside your federal, right, your income did not go up very much. Right. Inflation went up. Everything else went up, right? So now you're actually taxed more, and it's the invisible tax.
Right.
So as you get the raises inside of there to offset the inflation, all you're doing is getting taxed more.
Yeah. And not only that, is that we actually had some reports come out last year that wages were increasing. So wages did increase. They just didn't increase as much as inflation did. So you're actually losing that monetary value over a longer period of time because your wages aren't keeping up with inflation. Again, they did increase, just not as much as inflation did. So either way you see it, your earnings are getting eaten by inflation.
Yeah, that's crazy. Your earnings are getting eaten up by inflation. Your salaries did go up a little bit. Could have thrown you into a higher tax bracket. Right. Now you're paying higher in taxes, and you're getting that double side of it. So I think financial planning in a whole is changing in our industry. I've seen a huge amount of change since I started 10 years ago.
Yeah, since I've started Texas Tech, I've seen a lot of change.
It's nuts. I think if you're a middle income person that is starting, we classify it 3 different ways: surviving, stabilizing, right, and thriving. That's the 3 classifications, because you got to put it into a class of where somebody's at, because we have to internalize somebody's story. And so if somebody's surviving, it's hard for us. We can help them mitigate, but it's hard to save. If they're pinching every single penny to make ends meet, that's hard for financial planning to do anything other than just try to help them survive. That's why we're saying that's a surviving. And then the stabilizing class where, hey, I've made ends meet. Now I'm starting to save, right? That's the class that's really changing the most, because financial planning used to only be for the wealthy. It used to be for the thriving class, that they make so much more money than what they need to live off of. They can actually thrive, and they can go into different ventures and all that stuff. I'm starting to see that, and I don't want to use the term trickle down, but I'm starting to see financial planning actually play into more the middle and lower class. Middle and lower class, not in a negative connotation, but
No, not at all.
right? Just saying the middle class is now becoming sophisticated enough where they're actually seeing value from diversifying their assets outside of their W-2 income and working. And it's like most people we talk to, even if it's a small business owner, is now getting sophisticated enough to know that there's some tax strategies from owning entities now. And I think the last 50 to 100 years, when we created, the government wanted people, there's a great,
Just save.
well, not only that, they wanted people to have that W-2 income.
Right, that as well. Yeah.
They wanted people to go to work for somebody and create a W-2 income because it's clean, you get taxed.
Yeah.
I think
Very
that's
simple way.
yeah, turning on its head. I would love to see, I wonder if there's a stat, Ryan, in the background. Can you look up how many entities, I'm talking LLCs, companies, our entity structures have been created over the last 50 years? And so this is an interesting conversation. Like if you go back to 1980 and you look at 2020, right? What is that, a 40-year span? I bet you the ramp of how many entities are
It's
created
increasing substantially.
exponentially, right? And what I mean by that is think about how somebody takes income. We look at it like if you're a W-2 employee, you get to take income, you get an income, a paycheck from somebody, then you pay taxes, then you live on the difference. If you are on the other side of that and you own an entity, you run the entity, you run everything through the entity that is legal, that is allowed, then you pay yourself a salary, right?
Yeah.
So you're running your vehicles through it, you're running your entertainment through it, you know, with clients and all that other stuff, which is half the time you spend time with clients anyways, right? They're usually your friends no matter what business you're in. And then you turn around and pay your kids, right? You do all of these things. So you're taking income from your sales, running all your expenses through it, then you're living on the difference and paying taxes. So it's kind of flipping everything on its head, which I think is really, really interesting. Would you agree to that one?
Yeah, you touched on a lot of good points there. I would second the fact that I think financial planning is becoming a lot more mainstream. Certainly, how anyone would have a CPA that they regularly go to. It's definitely becoming more broad. Something that a lot more people are looking at. But you touched on another good point, is that a lot of people just say, hey, we're looking for a financial planner to help us with our finances. A lot of people in those lower income brackets, unfortunately, there's not really much we can do. There's mostly they can do budgeting.
Yeah, it's budget planning.
Right. It's mostly budgeting, allocating expenses, and just trying to save as much money. But yeah, once you move up, you definitely need a higher level of sophistication in order to help these types of people.
I looked it up, and on average, 4.4 million businesses are started every year. So extrapolating from that, 60 million businesses have been started in the past 15 years.
That's insane.
60 million businesses in the past, how many? 15 years.
15 years.
60 million businesses have been started.
That's insane. That's a lot larger than that.
And that's just U.S., right?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That I think that here's the other thing that financial planning, and this is where I didn't understand financial planning when I get into it. You know, when you're new and you're rookie and you're learning the trade and you're learning your craft and you're doing all the things you can, it's a double-edged sword, right? So you got to do planning, and you usually start in that lower middle market because you are not educated to the degree to be able to service the higher markets.
Right.
And then as your knowledge expands, then so does your clientele. And I think it's the proof's in the pudding, right? You're not going to go to a guy worth $100 million and go, hey, and I'm a second year guy into it and going, I think I can help you, because that guy probably knows more than you do. You know what I'm saying? But I feel, and you've seen this, I feel pretty comfortable in rooms with high net worth guys. And the only reason I did that is I spent 10 years with a lot of tax attorneys, a lot of CPAs, a lot of trust attorneys.
Yeah, you also feel comfortable. I mean, talking with their CPAs and their attorneys. I mean, you know the language, you know how these strategies work, so you're comfortable in that area to talk very high level. You know, kind of the client more than likely will not be understanding what you're talking about.
But their other
your-
trusted advisors do.
Right, exactly. So your job is more of like, okay, here, we're going to talk and have this meeting, and we'll come to you with the strategies that we came up together.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
This is the conversation where I think it's fun, and I really want to dive in. Excuse me. I really want to dive into a lot of the stuff about planning, a lot of the questions about we get asked.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is good for a couple of things. One is I want clients to be able to reference something. It's a lot easier, like at the core of what we do is just serve people.
Mm.
And I think this goes back to a biblical belief. And if you don't believe in God and you don't have that bent, that's fine, right?
Mm.
But for me, I think the reward is twofold. One, there obviously is a monetary reward because you're working. Right. But the biggest reward is the more you serve people, I figured out the more you actually care about serving people, the more they actually see that you care about serving poor people, the more they refer you to other people because you're good at it. You turn to hone that craft in, and that's the fun part of it. So I want to dive into the way that we actually have that conversation here a little bit, but I want to rewind back to the beginning. And so I think your story was one of the things that attracted me to it because we interviewed a whole lot of CFPs coming out of tech. And there was 2 or 3 that I was like, wow, this is a good fit.
I'm glad you chose me.
Yeah, man, I'm glad I chose you too, right? Because it wasn't until after I hired you, I heard you never took out a student loan.
Yeah, that is true.
You never took out a student loan in college.
Never.
And your parents paid for
nothing.
That is insane to me. So how did you get through tech?
I worked my butt off, man.
You worked nights and evenings, didn't you?
Nights.
That is what I'm talking about right there. And so that's one of the cool things for me sitting in this chair, looking at where you're going to go. You're going to outdo me. I can already tell you're going to outdo me.
I hope so.
Yeah, you will. Because, I mean, the work ethic, and that's the hardest thing to find today is the work ethic.
I'll second that.
Yeah, there are so many people that feel like they deserve things before they have it. And I think our culture's teaching that.
There's a lot of people in my generation that they do expect things, but they also did grow up in a different generation, so they do see the world in a different lens.
They do,
and it's
not a bad thing.
It can be problematic, but it's not necessarily, like you were saying, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It can be problematic, but I think it just depends on ultimately your value system and how you were raised.
Yeah, I could see that. The big thing that I think that scares me with it is I don't think kids, and I'm talking about my own kids, like I got an 18-year-old that's fixing to go start her freshman year of college.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe I'm that old. I feel like a kid myself, and it's crazy, but I think kids can't struggle.
Right.
I think that's the biggest concern that I have is, and you go back to like World War II, and you go back to that generation of everybody there was nobody to build you up or your backstop.
Mm.
And I think that's the thing that scares me. And I told my 18-year-old, and I've told my 10-year-old, 7-year-old, he's not there yet. So, but I've had those conversations like I will make sure I lift you up, but I'm not your backstop. Yeah. And I think society has built it where they expect that everybody's a victim, and they expect society to be their backstop. So if I fail, then it's somebody else's problem. If I fail, it's somebody else's fault. And I think that's a big problem that we have in our culture today.
Yeah.
Is that, and it's nice to see somebody that says, dude, I'm going to work nights and weekends. I'm going to pay myself through school. So you're literally coming into this job, right, as a first year guy with no debt.
No debt, man. I worked my butt off every night. Never went out to any parties, never went out really drinking or anything. And
that's just water in that cup.
It is. As far as you know, that's just water. No, but yeah, man. I've been working since I was 15. Never stopped.
Yeah. That's awesome.
First job was at United Supermarkets.
Really?
Yeah, sacking groceries, being a cashier. Moved me up to a stocker, then to dairy, then eventually I ended up in maintenance because nobody wanted to do maintenance, and that was the only one that was willing to do it.
That works out. Got
Yeah.
paid, I bet.
Yep, though. Somewhat. I didn't know how to negotiate a salary back then. I was 15.
Yeah, right. That,
But I moved on to Texas Tech after that. I worked at one of the dorm halls eventually after a semester. I got moved up to a manager. Pretty quickly I learned why I was moved up to a manager is because a lot of people weren't putting in the work. And I guess a lot of people underestimate that. They just show up and, not even the bare minimum. It's just do more than what's expected. If you see something on the ground, just pick it up. A lot of people just used to walk over trash on the ground and be like, actually pick it up. So I guess that value was communicated in a way that
people see it.
Yeah, I mean, they really do. They see the effort that you put into your work. They see how much you care. If you just show up to work and just slack off, then expect to not have a job in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, right. It takes a lot longer to go through those and identify the people that work. It's a lot harder.
It's very difficult nowadays. I do hear a lot of the time that my generation's a lot lazier.
I don't think they're lazier. I think their focus is different. It used to be,
Yeah.
I work really, really hard to support my family.
Actually, yeah, I do somewhat agree with you, considering that in the world of social media that we're in now, you can become famous on any platform. You don't really have to have any real work ethic, because obviously being an influencer and all that, you have to put some work in. It's just not physical labor.
Mm-hmm.
You're probably putting in hours,
Mm-hmm.
but it's definitely not the same as clocking in a job and then doing your shift and then going home, and it's a completely different space and environment.
I totally agree with you on that. And I think that there are so many ways to make money now. Traditional employment is changing.
Right.
And so there's a class of people now that says, hey, I don't want to go work and make $50,000, $60,000 a year when I can go home, I can grab a computer, I can work remotely, I can do some little side projects here and there on Fiverr or whatever that the application is, and just make 2 or 3 different jobs to generate revenue, and they're all making $20,000-$30,000, and you look up and you're making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year.
It's very easy to get discouraged. Very easy to get discouraged.
Yeah, and so you get to make a choice. And the choice is very simple: is do you want a career where you're building a career path, that you're building something? And I think this is what we do here. And you've seen it. Like I would say my work ethic has really changed over the last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I try to have more time out of the office, because when I get in the office, I am just constant. Right. I can't keep focused. And because it's go from one thing to another thing, right? And we have 4 or 5 or 6 different projects, 4 or 5 or 6 different companies. Yeah. And so I have to allocate time for client time. I have to allocate time for this business. I mean, we just bought an ad agency, less than a month ago?
Yep. It's very, very complicated. Your day is very hectic. I mean, coming on board in December, I mean, that first 2 weeks that I was here, I mean, you were running around with your head cut off, man.
It was
very, very busy.
Yeah.
And I tried my best to get on board as fast as I can to
It was cool.
That stress for you, man.
And you saw that. Now that was the neat part of it, and that's the enjoyment I've had working with you, is because I didn't have to tell you. And I would say, if you're ever looking at hiring people and you're a business owner, the guys that actually, and I tell this when I onboard people, your entire job is to make my job easier. Yeah. Right. And that's the guy above you, the guy below you, the guy around you. It just make their job easier. And that's all working. And that's the communication side of it. Right. Yep. And so one is you got to get along with the people you work with. I think that's undervalued.
Definitely.
Undervalued. Right. And the culture here, I preach culture at our firm so much, because I've gone through a really bad culture. Mm-hmm. And then now we're at such a cool time where half the time we get off of work and we sit back and we just all cut up and have fun at 5:30, 6 o'clock at night, and then we look up and we go home to our families. But culture is such a cool thing, because you really got to enjoy it. And then the second is you just got to jump on whatever's hanging out there that says, hey, I can tackle that. I have a little extra time. I can take that off of this guy's hands, take that off of, without stepping on people's toes.
Yeah.
And making sure you stay in your lane a little bit, but you got to, just take it in there. And even Harrison was talking about this, and he's the head of our ops department, and he was like, man, the guy I didn't have to teach him a whole lot. Like, he just jumped in there and figured it out. And it was neat because I've never hired an actual CFP where we don't use the traditional financial planning tools that are on the market today.
What does that look like? Like education stuff?
Yeah, so you know what I'm talking about. There's a couple of softwares that are financial planning softwares, right? You're right.
Right.
And
Okay.
there's a couple of them out there. We don't really use those. I think they're old and outdated. And we're actually building our own financial planning software.
Yeah, we're trying to build it in a way that
It's open
'cause
architecture.
I've been there. Yeah, I've been there. In terms of, hopping on what you were saying earlier. I'm lucky enough to have had some internships outside of this job where I was able to access different financial planning softwares, how they worked, what was the pros and cons. So I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I've definitely used them.
You're
for
certified
years.
in one of the major ones.
I'm certified actually. Yeah.
And that's the
So-
one we use the least amount.
Ironically, yes. It's
And the only reason we use it is
very
because
clunky.
it is clunky,
It's
right?
very clunky.
But it's data aggregation is one of the things. What that means is that you can aggregate all your accounts into one window, one scene, and so you can see everything. And so if you have all
Yes.
these different banks and you have all these different accounts at an institution, you can aggregate it down. So that's the only reason we use it,
Yeah.
and that's pretty common.
Why I like just coming from the platform side of using like the softwares and everything, I can give you input on how to do the software, what's the pros and cons that I see that we can provide value to clients, and how we can maximize its efficiency to be as simple as possible for client view, client data. If they want to look at some numbers, they want to make a buying decision on a certain asset that they're trying to buy. Are we able to portray that in a way that is simple and easy to understand?
And that's where I think the old mantra or the old softwares were actually really built upon. It's a prestigious thing to have a financial plan. Like these financial planning companies put value in the actual plan itself.
Mm-hmm.
And we sit down and tell clients that I don't give a rip about the physical commodity of the plan itself.
Yep. The plan's always changing.
The plan's always changing. So this 40-page document that you got from these huge planning softwares that you come out of them, there's a value there, but the value is very diminished because if it's 40 pages long, how many clients will read it? Zero, right? And most of it is just CYA from some SEC or FINRA regulator.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all it is it's got to make sure all the language is in there, so it's CYA, right? And we do that because we have to do it, right? Mm-hmm. It's the industry's built on that structure. But what we see value in is the one page of a plan.
Yeah, that's very crucial. I second that yet again. Coming out of Texas Tech, I had to literally construct a financial plan in Excel. So they gave us a case study, and then we went through an entire semester where we built a financial plan in Excel. And that was a pain in my butt, man.
I bet it was, but it's simple, right? And
it was simple, right? Yeah, and
facts and everything that went into it.
They wanted us to see if we could jot down all the information, make it nice and concise, and see how we would explain it to a client in the simplest of forms, which is what we're trying to do again with our software. And
so that's where I think maps come in. And I think there's different maps. So I'm not saying that our entire financial planning software is one page, but I'm saying every narrative, whether it's allocation of assets, is one page.
Right.
Whether it's protection of you and your family and risk management is one page.
That's also,
right? And it's every single, and you go down that list inside of there, it's all one page. Withdrawal, we call it the withdrawal map, right? Is one page. And so all you want to do is never be able to switch from the way that you own assets or companies. It's crazy how many clients that we have will own 5 to 15 companies.
Yes.
And it's no longer owning one company. I go to work and I own an electrician company and it's one entity. They'll have an entity for their operating entity. They'll have an entity for all of their assets. And then they'll have an entity for their real estate assets, right? And then they'll have this splintered off marketing a company, right? Kind of like what we do. I mean, I think we're up to like 9 or 12. I don't even know what it is. Jennifer manages all that, but we're up to a massive amount of entities that we have to do, and it's a pain in the butt. Pays for our CPA. We keep his lights on. What I'm saying, the cost of our own internal CPA that we have to pay to have all those entities. But now you have to have it. That's the way the industry is actually in the world of going, is you got to have a lot of different entities for different purposes. And people that are hearing this for the first time, they're going, what in the world are you talking about? Well, there's different taxations on different assets. So you don't want to own, typically, I'm not saying this is absolute, but I'm saying typically you don't want to own real estate inside of an S corp, right? Your stepped up basis is different the way your taxes are, but you don't want to have a partnership if you're a profitable company and without having an S corp. So operating entities are taxed differently through an S corp because you get QBI, right? Compared to, partnership that you have inside of an LLC. So every one of these entities are just taxed a little bit different for maximizing your tax strategy that you have inside of it. And financial planners have turned, I got to quit drinking Red Bull. Financial planners have turned into the good ones. And I learned this from Wes. And if y'all haven't seen Wes Young, Wes is an amazing financial planner. But the greatest financial planners I've seen ever become expert in tax. And I'm not saying you're a CPA. I'm not saying you're a tax attorney. We have those guys on our staff. But what I am saying is that you need to understand how taxes play a part, because you can't build wealth unless you understand tax. If you're giving up 40% of everything you build to the government, it's not like you're stealing from the government. You're just effectively using what the law allows you to use.
Right. Yeah. It's not the most efficient use of your money.
Nah. And so most clients don't have the time or energy to become experts.
Yeah.
Right. And so we explained it to clients that it's simple, and we're in Texas, so football is everything. Right. As I always say, I'm the quarterback, right? You're the coach. You tell us which play the client's the coach. You tell us which play to run. Right. We'll make sure the guys are lined up on the field in the right manner, and we'll throw the ball to the right guy. So if you need to talk to a CPA that's diverse in what we're talking about, we'll point you to 2 or 3 of them that we work with. If you need a tax attorney or trust attorney or special needs attorney, right?
Yeah, it's another big thing right there. Is that a lot of people say, yeah, I have an attorney. Well, yeah, is it the type of attorney that you need for the situation that you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you having your business attorney do your estate plan? No.
No. Well, a lot of them do, but it's not.
Again, it's not the most efficient use of your money.
And the greatest story I ever tell everyone, I was like, great, that's awesome. I was like, hey, we can go and we'll have a conversation. We'll include this attorney. But when's the last time that you went to the foot doctor? Now I just lost me. See, I went blank right there. Podiatrist to get brain surgery.
Yeah.
Right? When's the last time you went to your heart doctor to get brain surgery done? And they're like, what are you talking about? And I was like, that's what you're referring to. Everybody thinks an attorney is an attorney, right? Everything. And it could be further from the truth, right? So most attorneys, you either have a small market attorney that kind of does a little of everything, and we call them the generalist, right? And they're not bad, they're not good, they're just small market generalists, right? And there's financial planners that are generalists. There's nothing wrong with it.
Right.
But sometimes higher net worth and middle market or business owners, they need to go to an attorney or a professional that specializes in that specific thing. And so we aligned ourselves with, we have a patent attorney, we have a trademark attorney, we have a probate attorney, we have a special needs trust attorney, we have a tax attorney. We have every single one that you can figure out and find out that you need. And sometimes you don't need to pull that lever, but it's nice to have that quiver in your bucket here to be able to shoot that bow whenever you need to.
Yeah. It's exactly how we tell clients is that estate attorneys, essentially the ones that we refer out, they make their money fixing the mistakes that past attorneys
the bulk of their money it's screwed up, right? It's funny. And so what's nice about us is we learned a long time ago, and this was hard to get through our broker dealer, and so we created our own registered investment advisory firm, our RIA, is we created it so that we could actually have these guys on staff. Right. So we don't have our own set of tax attorneys. We have our own set of trust attorneys, and these guys came from an industry, all they do is do strategies. So their entire job is to frame these things right and then we pass these concepts on to their attorney. So they're getting the best of both worlds. They don't have to spend $50,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 just to come up with this cool strategy that is the most effective for their plan.
Right.
We provide that, but then we go and hand it off to an attorney, their attorney, or we provide them an attorney and say, hey, we can't act as your fiduciary. We can't act as your attorney. So go get this double checked and make sure you go do it. And I think that's the right way to do it, because that's the fiduciary way.
Back to what you were saying is that we're essentially the quarterback of the team.
Perfect.
We have to gather the team and make sure every little piece is being, we're not the micromanager, but we are giving them the overall broad structure. Sometimes actually we are the micromanager. I mean, we're telling
pushing
the client's
forward.
story, and pushing the clients forward.
And I think that's the biggest thing, and telling their story. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And so most attorneys or most professionals in the industry are there to execute. And so there's very few of us are there to document their story to give them the most efficient way to execute.
Right. And most of the times you have instances where, say, their CPA, just as an example, they're executing the most tax write-offs, the most tax deductions that they possibly can, but they're not looking at the big picture. They're just looking at what's the most amount of money I can save this year, and then they push it off in next year, and then, you might have some tax liabilities next year that all of a sudden you're not prepared for.
Right.
Because you didn't have that quarterback. You instead just had a CPA who, again, he was just doing his job.
Making it the most effective this year.
Right. But it might not be the most benefit to the client because, again, it's doesn't usually fall in line with your story. You're not telling your CPA every single little detail that you're buying in your entity, that you're expensing, all this stuff. And they're essentially just there to make your tax return compliant.
Right. On time and compliant.
Compliant.
That's their only job, right? And so we try to help them make it most efficient. And I think that's important. The thing that I thought was cool in this, and this is where really I'm going to pick on the ag industry, right? So most ag guys that I've ever worked in my life, they do two things. One is they learned and they're really good at growing a crop.
Yeah.
Right? Whatever that's a crop of horses, crop of cattle, crop of cotton, right? It doesn't matter, right? They're all in our book is the same, right? That Schedule F is a really cool thing. The hard part is they never want to pay taxes. So they prepay, they do all these things that could be efficient for them this year, and it absolutely screws them when they go to exit long term.
Yeah.
And I will say absolutely screws them. And I think most CPAs are catching on to it now. But early in my career, I was like, why are you doing that? You're just pushing the ball down the road. And everybody thinks that tax deductions or tax deferment, it's not a tax avoidance. It's just deferment. Yeah. You're just deferring that tax liability to sometime in the future. But if you defer for 25 years, you're either waiting for you to unwind progress and lose everything, right? And then you don't owe the taxes because you're just going negative. Yeah. Or you push it to a point where you can't defer it anymore, and instead of paying a little bit in a 10 or 15 or 20 or 30% tax bracket, now you're paying something that was, for 10 years in a 15% tax bracket. Now you're paying everything in 39.6. And you actually increased your tax liability because you kept on deferring. Yeah. And the ag industry is really good at this. As far as deferring, and all they do is they prepay their feed, right, their fertilizer, their seed, and then they turn around and buy that green and red steel, and they defer all those, all of those toys they want to buy so they can mitigate taxes to the detriment of their long-term plan. And I sat down with what were those clients? 25, 26 years old, two farmers,
something like that.
I mean, they're
25.
Yeah, 25. Pretty young. And I love working with young farmers. Yeah. Because, I mean, 1% of the population grows 99% of our food.
Yeah.
Right? And so the problem is that almost all ag producers in the world, or in the United States especially, are like almost 60.
Yeah, and it's all grown in the Midwest.
Yeah, it's nuts. And so my biggest concern I have, and I'm being selfish here, but also the servant side to it, is saying, dude, I got to educate the young ag producers. Like I gotta, you gotta educate them. Like if you don't educate them in what we do, right, and give them a chance, because it's gonna end up being corporate farming and conglomerates. And you're seeing that. You're seeing the wealthiest of the people owning farms today. And we've talked about this in so many podcasts before.
Buying massive farmlands.
Massive farmlands, right? Yeah. And we had Rodney Mogan on, which he's one of the largest farmers in the world, and he did it the right way and inherited from generation after generation and just kept it all in the family, and they did it the right way. I like small farming. I like the farmer that owns 500 acres to 500,000 acres. I do not like the corporate farming that you're going in and you are a California or New Yorker or, that has, and they're just buying the shit out of it for the tax. They have no idea what they're doing inside of it. And they're just, it's cannibalizing the industry and it's driving up the cost of farming. And that's going to be our biggest concern. And I'm scared about that. And going back to Dr. Starr, and I think that's going to be a great conversation with him on it, because that's a good question for him. Yeah. So it's really interesting. Before we leave, talk about your family, though, because I think this is really a cool story. Is your parents migrated from Mexico?
Yeah. They came in the early 90s, I believe. Met here in Lubbock, and man, I mean, just the stories that they tell me, just trying to make it, is I think their first house was maybe two bedroom, 1 bath, maybe 1 bedroom. I'd have to follow back up with them, but the house that I grew up in was 2 bedroom, 1 bath, and we shared that bathroom in between. It was like one of those bathrooms that was in between both rooms.
Oh yeah.
It was a very, very small house, maybe 700 to 800 square feet. Very, very small. And it was me, my older sister, my older brother, my mom, and my dad. So it was 5 of us living in that house until we finally moved to the house where we're currently at. We did make some progress there. I like our house. Harrison makes fun of me all the time for it, but that's just Harrison.
You got to love him.
But
your parents are... What do your parents do?
My mom is a stay-at-home mom, and my dad, he works at a cotton gin.
Cotton gin. Mm-hmm. And he's worked there.
So he's moved around in the past couple of years or so. Issues with management and all that. They're not very friendly people that work at those cotton gins.
Yeah, it's hard labor inside of there, but it
is very hard. It's very labor intensive. He works almost 12 hours every day, man. That's what I'm saying, man. I get that work ethic from my parents, man. I've just, ever since I was little, they've been working their tails off to try and make a better life for us. So I'm not gonna waste that.
No, and you've done a really great job of it. Graduated with Texas Tech, financial planner, CFP.
And again, man, like it all goes back to money. Unfortunately, man, our system is built around money. And working while I was at Texas Tech, I mean, I'd get out of class, I'd say around 4 p.m. and then an hour later, whether or not I brought my clothes to school, I would either just change in the restroom and just go to because I worked at one of the dining halls as a manager. I just get changed in the restroom and just start going. And since I was one of the managers, I had to close. And the dining hall closed at 11. But, taking care of everything, getting everything cleaned up and such, I didn't get out till like 12, maybe 1.
And start all over the next day at school at 7, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, at 8 in the morning. And that was my hell. That was my hell for a good 4 years until I'm here, man.
That's awesome. I've enjoyed having you here, and I think it's good. So
I appreciate working here, man.
Man, I do too. I think
you're a good boss, man. Because there's a lot of people that I've worked for that are not the most ethical. I've gotten blessed to work here with you because you're a very ethical person, and I see that in how you communicate with clients. I don't think I could work at a firm where they're not doing the client's best interest.
Yeah, it's
very shady.
It is, and that's remember, that's the first thing I tell every employee that comes here. There's a lot of things we're going to butt heads on. There's things that we're going to do wrong, all that stuff. But if I ever question your ethics, you're gone.
Yeah, another thing that might be a little good source of trivia here is that we always mention this in our program at Texas Tech is that you actually don't need a degree or any sort of designation to call yourself a financial planner.
No, you really just need to trust the person that you're working with and make sure they have your best interest at heart. And I think that's a really cool one. But off camera, we were talking about something else that I thought was really interesting, because one value that I got that I didn't even consider, and this is really one, is the fact that I didn't consider it makes me think that I was looking at the best candidate for the job, and it wasn't even a part of the mindset. But the second is what I thought was interesting is that you really holding yourself in, even as a paraplanner, holding yourself in that room, being just a first year guy, has been really interesting for me to watch, because you don't have an accent, but yet you are completely bilingual. In fact, you speak mostly Spanish in your household.
Yeah. So with my siblings, it kind of goes 50-50, because they kind of grew up in the same circumstances as me, where second generation. And so we go 50-50 English and Spanish here. But my parents, they don't understand English, especially my dad. So I communicate strictly in Spanish with him. My mom understands English somewhat, and she can speak it a little bit. But for the most part, it's all Spanish. All Spanish.
And it's neat because there's a couple of cases I don't think I would have actually been able to be the best planner with them, because you're actually sitting in that room with me, and you could actually communicate, because they had a spouse that was strictly Spanish speaking.
Spanish speaking, yeah. That's where I'd like to see. That's where I want to provide value. I know a lot like you were saying, there's a lot of instances where you might not know where a client is from, what they speak. So there's value in having another person there that speaks a different language, but also that understands the different culture where they're coming from, and the sort of the standards that they hold.
I think it's really hard to actually have this conversation in our culture today, because you're so afraid to offend. And I think it's neat that we have such a cool culture in our office that we can actually have these deep conversations about different cultures and be okay with it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
You have to.
You have to. And you know, you used to be able to do that. I remember growing up and being around different cultures and being able to just, you know, because y'all, and I'm saying y'all as being American Mexican, right, is to y'all just have different traditions than what, you know, a German or an Italian does, right?
Yeah. So
I don't think either one's good or bad. I just think it's different, right? And so it's neat.
Mexicans are very, very Catholic. They are, to say the least, very Catholic. They hold a very traditionalist worldview in that sense. That's probably as far as I'll go touching on that subject. But that being said, I also consider myself a Catholic, so
it's good. I think it's neat, but what I think's cool about it is it opens the firm up to being more
open.
Well, just providing better service.
Right.
So it wasn't a service I could have provided efficiently that I wouldn't be able to provide.
Yeah.
You know, because we didn't have we had Zach way back when, which he had a master's in Spanish, and it was great to have Zach. And so, but it's different when you have somebody that has grown up in the culture that you've grown up, because not only can you speak the language, you actually understand the culture behind the language. And so it's really fun for us on that side of it. And it's been huge value. And we have a massive case that we're working on right now that I'm 100% confident that I worked on them for 3 years. Huge multi-businesses, have 8 different businesses all over West Texas. And I just don't think without having you in that room that we would have, been able to service them or actually, implementing a full-on financial plan. And we've done a really good job with that. And so I'm extremely excited about it. And I think we're going to do a lot of great work because I think that family needs it. And it's multi-generational, right? And it's the parents and the second generation starting to run the businesses.
Yeah,
and
so they're literally almost in the same boat as I am.
Right.
So there's a lot that we can communicate on that aspect, not only on, hey, this is how we can help you out, but this is how we also connect on a deeper, more human level.
And it's fun. And that's a cool part. It is fun. That's
getting to know just different people from different walks of life. It's very rewarding.
It is.
The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision.
I wanted, and we're going to end on this because I wanted a little insight into the way that we do planning, because I think it's really important the way that we do planning. Yeah. And again, I was taught by 3 different guys, one from California, one from Boston, and one from Texas, and over a 10-year period. And I thought it was really, really neat because I look back and I reflect on this, and I think that reflection lets me understand where we were to where we're going and what we've accomplished. And each one of these practices that I learned from gave me such an insight, and my ability to, I don't think anything's ever, it's just improved upon, and taking what's great from all these and building it into our own system and process and being able to service clients. And so we distill our planning down to 3 different terms and 3 different things during that. Is more of a discovery phase, right? And then you have what we consider, and I guess you can say it's 4, but it's really 3, but there's 4 different sections of it. So I'll explain that. So our discovery phase is what we consider our location meeting. Yeah. And what we mean by location is, I think it's cool to have this conversation with you because there's a question that's coming after this. Mm-hmm. It's not the location of, if you looked at a map and you actually said, hey, where are you at? There's a lot of clients can't find themselves or where they're at today. Yeah. And if you can't find where you're at, then how do you know where you're going? Right. And then you got the exact opposite, where people know exactly where they're at today, but they don't know where they're going. Yeah. Right. And so this is why the map thing plays into the location meeting, right? So we help people understand through a measurable action plan, a map of where they're at today and where they want to go. Yeah. And we provide them that knowledge and that path and that process to get from A to B. Yeah. And what we do is distill that down into a term that everybody wants to be wealthy or rich, however you want to define it.
What do you define as wealthy?
Correct. And that's, everybody's like, hey, what does that mean? And I actually think it's such a relative term. Like, I could tell you this is the best desk ever made. Yeah. Right. And or table ever made. And it's, until you compare it to something else, there's no comparison to it. Right. And so same thing, it's such an abstract term to be wealthy and rich. And some people believe that being wealthy and rich is,
getting to $1 million, getting to
$1 billion. Yeah.
Getting to $1 billion.
Yeah. It could be anything. I define wealthy or rich is having enough income to support where you want to be, to allow you to experience life the way you want to. Yeah. And so to me, it's like, once you hit that threshold that I have enough income where I don't have to rely on my human capital. Yeah. Right. And I'm not saying that you don't want to achieve more, because I actually believe God made us in a way that we want to make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. And I stole that from Wes. Wes, if you ever listen to it, I totally stole that from you. I actually stole a lot of this podcast from you on the side of there, because I was trained off of Wes's stuff. But the location meeting is one of them. But we've expanded the location meeting into the map. Yeah. And I think that's where we differ from different people's process, and Wes really has a great process, and I think we've just taken his process and we've built upon it. And I think the map is one of the things that we've really built upon. Mm-hmm. My point is, so now you're on a location. A location for us is different than a location for the client. Yeah. Client's trying to understand where they're at, where they want to go, and they want to define what rich is or wealth is, and how do they achieve it.
Yeah, we have to get their grinds
going.
Grind, yeah.
Get them up, get them going, and help them define it, right? For that's their side of it. For us as financial planners, our side of it is, it's simple. We got to understand your story. Yeah. It's like we've had this conversation 5,000 times. We know all of it. And I get it, and I would say it's acting, but it's one of those things that you're actually setting in those meetings, and you're like, I know where you're going 7 steps ahead of where you're going, right? Because we've done it 5,000 times. And the outcome differs by the case and by the client. But
every single time.
But the common denominator inside of there's typically don't, right?
Right.
People want to take care of their family. They want to build
underlying-
wealth. They want to retire comfortably, right? The underlying things that people want to achieve is pretty common.
Safety.
Safety,
Security.
security, all those things are common inside of it. So that's the common denominator. The hard part is like what's important to them and how to get there, right? And so understanding the story so we understand how to shape them takes us into what we call the expectation meeting.
Yeah.
And it's pretty clear for us. And this is the hardest meeting for us, I would say.
I would agree with that. We're trying to set the expectations of the relationship and where we see ourselves moving forward. So at the expectation meeting, at this point, we've already digested their story. We've already
Internalized it.
internalized it. And now we're just essentially mirroring back what they've told us back to them. And, hey, does this sound good?
Is this
Does
right?
this-
Is this
is
what you
this
want to
right?
do? Right?
Yeah.
And you're
Does
getting
this
them
sound
to
good?
tell you it.
Yeah. And they're, they think about it. And it's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. And it's like, great. We found common ground. We can move on from here.
Yeah, we can move forward with it.
Yeah.
But it sets expectation because I think a lot of people think that we're going to provide them the service and that's where it stops.
Mm-hmm.
Planning is completely different than any other thing in the industry.
Yeah, you're not buying a product.
No, you're walking alongside somebody constantly. So if they're not engaging with you and executing what you believe, it's the worst client.
I would agree with you.
You're spinning your wheels.
There has to be an open communication there. You have to be always actively engaging with your financial advisor or planner as soon as your financial plans change, or if you're thinking about making a big buying decision, is this the most effective way to do it?
And be consistent in your communication with them. It's
Consistency.
both sides of it, though, right?
Yes.
So we communicate to you, you got to communicate back. And sometimes that's the hard part with it, where these guys, especially the type A high-end business guy, is so busy, he just doesn't want to communicate back. And it happens 10 or 20% of the time. And then you just kind of have that, come to Jesus meeting where you're like, hey, buddy, like I'm spending a lot of time, a lot of work doing all these things, and I'm not getting that feedback from you. So is this a good relationship for you, and is it a good relationship for us? Yeah. That's the expectation meeting. We very rarely, because we identify the clients that don't want to adhere to what our recommendations are early in the process, we try to get them out and say it's just not a good fit.
It's actually very easy to do that. There's a lot of clients that, in that first meeting, they want to find out where they're at too. Mm-hmm. So, they play ball. They tell you all the information that you need to know. And by the expectation meeting, they're gone mentally.
Yeah.
They just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Or, even after the facts, if you've already gotten that far, a lot of people just don't want to communicate at that point. They're just, hey, I've delegated all my duties to you. You're my financial advisor. And then they come back to you 6 months later. Hey, what have we done? Well, there hasn't been any communication. What do you mean, what have I done? Have you picked up the phone and have I updated your story? No, because I haven't had any communication with you.
Right.
So communication is definitely key.
And we're talking different from financial planning to wealth management or insurance management or anything like that, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm not talking about a product or something like that. I'm talking about strictly financial planning, and I think you hit the nail on the head. And then we go into the third meeting, and I don't want to say that in a negative connotation. I'm just saying that it's a two-way street, right? It's not a one-way street. It's not financial planner serves and you don't do anything.
It's an active relationship.
It's an active relationship, and that's why we say the financial plan itself is not anything relatively valuable.
Yeah, it's just evidence that planning took place.
There it is.
Yeah.
That's all it is. It's just the evidence that planning took place. It's the constant engagement of wealth to the degree of the client. And I think that is so important. And then we go into the third meeting, which is, I think, is our direction meeting. And the direction meeting is just simple, right? You defined where they're at, where they want to be, and where they want to go, right? Mm-hmm. And then we defined what the expectations by both parties are. And the third meeting is, okay, here's the ideas that we have. Which one do you want to tackle? There's hundreds of different strategies and hundreds of different combinations. That means there's thousands of different strategies that apply to the client. Yeah. Which one is most relevant to you in the season of life that you're in that actually sets forth the actual plan throughout the year? Yeah. And it's that constant engagement of saying, hey, here's 4 or 5 or 6 strategies. We need to execute these things. We need to do these few things, and it's ever evolving. And it's that constant engagement and the direction inside of it. And then the last one is we this is new to us. We actually developed this last 12, 18 months.
Yeah.
As we quit doing review meetings. Is the review meetings is a past tense things that I don't believe in anymore. I think it's actually, we call them gain. So what did you gain, right? It's the gain meeting.
What value did you gain?
What value did you get? And I think that is the changing of the guard when it comes to financial planning, is because it's quantifying that, and that's ever evolving for us in our practice. Is I don't think that is the hardest meeting to actually communicate, because we have to communicate value.
Right.
That is our job, is communicate value in what we've done and how we've moved you from A to B and the closest thing. That's why we're developing our software. That's why we're developing some of these things. And the neat thing about the software is we're actually taking very, very complex strategies like burn rate that is used in finance for CFA levels, and distilling this down into small business owners to be able to understand how much debt to income that they're actually using inside their business. Things like that is where I think the gain is. And I think that gain meeting is going to define our practice, and we're going to continue to evolve that arm into being able to quantify the value that we provide clients. And I think being ethical is a baseline at the firm, but also on top of that is being able to quantify value. And Ryan is, our producer here, and he's done a great job. But Ryan, I think you've taken on a new path in the firm now, right? So you're leaving Alpha Capital, or are you left Alpha Capital after?
Darn.
He's gone. He's been gone for close to a month now.
Yep.
And so
We'll miss you, Ryan.
Actually, as of today, exactly 1 month.
yeah, so he's a month in. He's gone. Ryan's out of the deal. So Ryan's taking over the creative director, position, kind of playing both sides of the house until we get a replacement for him on the production side, which I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But he's now running Dark Puppet, and so our media company that we've had for like 15 years, he's running that, and we have 2 new additions to the team and a complete agency now, and continuing to grow that side of it. So I'm excited where Alpha Capital is going. I really think we have a great team on Dark Puppet that's actually growing us there. And then we have our software that's coming in the middle of it. That thing is a beast, and it is the hardest thing to develop.
We're hoping to get this out as soon as possible to all our clients, sort of we're not going to give it out to our clients just yet, because we want to test it out first, make sure all the systems actually work, and make sure it's supposed to work how it's supposed to.
I know, and finding developers is really hard, and
very tough.
And it's a very expensive endeavor, and then 2, it's very, for what we do, you think there's this path, right? Now, when you're building out an application, and I've built 2 out, and I have patents in web application development, and so I've done this before 15 years ago. And so I kind of have a very small scope of what it's going to take to get there. Is you have to think through every single version, every single iteration of every single path. So the branching off is so hard to have your brain, go down every single one and stay consistent inside the overall process. So I'm excited to push that out to our clients. I'm excited that you're here, and I think you're going to be a great advisor, a great financial planner. I just, my hope is to keep you as my planner for as long as I possibly can. And I told you this week, I was like, dude, like you're growing so fast that I know you're going to want to take that leap pretty soon, and it's going to be years away, because it's a 3-year plan for us. But you got to find your replacement, because that dude's got some big shoes to fill already. So I appreciate you being a part of Alpha Capital, and I love you coming on to Pursuing Alpha, man.
I appreciate you having me, man.
It's been a great conversation. This was actually a really good podcast. I'm excited about, because there's a lot of information here, and hopefully our clients and also some of our prospects, or hopefully our clients and some of the consumers out there that listen to our podcast can take some great information from this, and they can glean a little bit behind the curtain and see what it's like from our perspective as financial planners.
Yeah, hopefully they find some value.
I truly hope that. Man, thanks for coming on the show, and I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.